Welcome back, Flyers nitty-gritty fans, to Getting Gritty with It with your host, Yariv, Wolok, my partner in crime, Vasili Gianarakos. Vasili, welcome back for another episode. How you doing, buddy?
Doing good, Yariv. Not too bad. I mean, Thursday today, for everybody listening, will be Friday tomorrow. So we made it, guys. End of the long week, end of the work week. So we're here now to, fill your need with some Flyers hockey talk. And we got a great guest on this week as well, in Dan Silver. I mean, you guys have probably heard him on a bunch of different podcasts, a Flyers podcast, but mainly, our brother podcast for Flyers Nitty as well, the O&B Puckcast. So how's it going, Dan? We're really happy to have you on.
It's doing great, man. I'm happy you guys asked me to join. Always a pleasure. And I think this is actually my maiden voyage with you guys. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's the dog days of summer. We got a lot of heat coming through, and a lot of heat from Flyers fans too. So it's we're just kind of seeing what's going to happen.
Yeah, I love the lack of knowing what to say there, because you're just like, what do I even say about the situation?
I've spent the last few off seasons being optimistic about this team, right? Like two off seasons ago was like super optimistic, and last off season was like sort of optimistic. There were some things to be excited about, like Ryan Ellis was like, this is exciting, and now I don't know, man. It's like it's difficult trying to find things to be excited about.
Yeah. We talked about this quite a bit, like throughout the episodes, and the beginning of the off season, especially, was, this fan base is lacking hope, and it's like Chuck Fletcher has not been inspiring hope, not in the fan base. I don't know about the locker room. I don't know what's happening behind it. We hear things. I don't know what's true. I'm not going to pretend like I do, but it doesn't seem like there's a lot of hope within the fan base that this is going to be turned around. Even the people who are more positive, I'll definitely say I'm more positive, right? And Dan, Vasili and I are very similar in that respect. We are drained. So
yeah, we're usually the positive ones and try to give a different kind of perspective as to what the fans are kind of feeling. But I would say the same, that like if you look at the moves the management's making in terms of just the logic behind it and things like that, there doesn't really seem to be too much of that and too much of an actual cohesive plan. So that's the thing that I think is the most concerning, really, that you don't really know where the ship is headed and really where it's even pointed and what direction they're kind of looking at. Do they want to compete? Do they want to rebuild? Is it somewhere in between? Who really knows? It's almost like a wait and see kind of situation, right?
It's difficult. It's difficult, guys. Like, I mean, and we've all had differing opinions. I've gotten into arguments with Yariv online, like about stuff. I've gotten into arguments with all different folks on Twitter online, and we argue about stuff. And I'm sure if we all like were together at a bar having some drinks or something, everyone would get along for the most part. But even people you disagree with now, it's like no one disagrees that there's just not a whole lot to be excited about with this team. I mean, there's just so much uncertainty with injuries and with just they're one of the highest spending teams towards the cap, and they're looking like they're going to probably be a bottom 5 team in the league. I mean, the whole thing is very strange, and Chuck Fletcher just seems like I don't know. He's just like, he's almost like, he's like a guy that seems like he's being held prisoner almost. Like he's got, Bobby Clark in one ear and Paul Holmgren in another and Dave Scott in another and Dean Lombardi in another. And he's like getting all these messages. And I'm not defending Chuck Fletcher at all, but he seems like someone who, if he had a plan, I'm not sure he can execute the plan because of all the different kind of input he's getting from different people. And you watch him in these press conferences, it just seems like he's basically lying. I mean, a lot of the time with his answers, and I don't know. I mean, if we weren't, if we didn't love this team so much and love watching them, and hey, it's Thursday night, man, it's Saturday night. Hey, we get to watch the Flyers tonight, right? We used to look forward to it. And the last few years, it's just been kind of, you don't really look forward to it. And I'm certainly not really looking forward to it this year at this point. It's like they've got to go out and kind of prove it and show us, But yeah, it's difficult.
You know what's interesting? As I'm listening to you talk, I think the only thing that would inspire excitement, like truly at this point with the fan base, would be to fire Chuck Fletcher. And I don't even know if that's enough. It would have to be like fire Chuck Fletcher with like a plan of like bringing a guy in. They don't have to fire everybody in the beginning, but to bring in a guy who really goes through and, does what Hextall does, but hopefully does a better job. But somebody who can really just change the culture. I think it's the only way people would even buy in without the hope of, let's be honest, which I feel like this is what Chuck Fletcher's thinking, is that the thing that saves his job is John Tortorella. I think he's the only thing that I've heard so far as somebody talking, saying the right things, bringing the right attitude, where I'm like, it will not fix next year for me. I don't see a Stanley Cup next year, right? But I do see at the very least a guy who can establish the beginning of a culture that hopefully can turn into something that will be a winning mindset. But again, he's got a lot of work to do, and it's not necessarily going to be fun to watch, especially early on,
Yeah, I would agree too. I mean, like if you look at just how, a new coach comes in, right, and you're establishing systems, whole new roster, he's not really familiar with all the players, you can't expect instant success. But I think there is, at least with Tortorella, a track record of at least teams buying into defensive structure, actually showing some semblance of like knowing what they're doing in their own end, especially on like breakouts, and also just like defending the front of their net, which the Flyers have been super poor at. So I guess that's the hope, right? That you get like accountability in the locker room with Tortorella and some sort of structure, so they don't look like a rudderless ship out there on the ice. And I mean, obviously, with some improvement, Fletcher's hoping, okay, if we move from bottom five to, let's say, I don't know, 12th, 13th, 14th in the league, is that enough to save my job? Time will tell, because sports results oriented business. So we'll see how management would take something like that of a slight improvement. But if the team's just as bad as last season, I mean, I can't see why they would ever keep Fletcher around. The only thing that would make sense is, as you're kind of alluding to, Dan, is just the fact that, I mean, if you have all these, different leadership voices in Holmgren, Clark, Lombardi, and things like that, in your ear, and you're kind of satisfying all of them as Chuck Fletcher, does that buy him more time as the GM? Who knows, right? And how the dynamic kind of is there. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, I think all those people are happy to blame someone else. So if
probably
if they fail, if they fail miserably and things are going really poorly, I think Fletcher's probably going to be the first one out, and maybe they replace him with Danny Briere, who again, no one really. The Briere thing's interesting to me because we've got all these Flyers fans who are like, make Danny Briere the GM. I don't think any of us really know if he's going to be good as a GM. I mean, he's still extremely inexperienced. I mean, you see guys like Steve Yzerman and Joe Sakic that have gone on from very good playing careers to become really good NHL GMs. Yeah. You just never know, right? Until they go to that role. And the Tortorella thing is to me, it's like I think you guys are 100% right that Tortorella is probably the only reason for optimism right now, just because this group of players is not, you look at it, it's not really like a playoff team, I don't think. But John Tortorella has a history of getting better performances out of players, and sort of, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, right? That's what John Tortorella does. He gets guys blocking shots. He gets guys playing as a team. He's already sort of started with like an us against the world mentality with some of his quotes that he's come out with. But the problem for me, and I think a lot of other Flyers fans, is like, but do we want to be a borderline playoff team, or do we want to have a shot at getting, one of these generational players at the top of next year's draft? Yeah. So for me, you look at the teams that have had dynasties recently, every single one of them has had multiple number one or number two picks. And so my preference would be that this team is not very good next year, and they get one of the top three picks. They get either Bedard or Mishkov or Adam Fantilli or someone else that like really bursts onto the scene, because next year's draft looks loaded at the top, instead of another pick between whatever, 7 through 11. So it's sort of mixed emotions for me. Like, I want to be excited about John Tortorella. I think he's a good human being. I think he's a really good hockey coach. I want to be excited about it, but on a night-to-night basis, I think they'll be more competitive because of him. But I don't know if that's what we want this year for the long-term outlook of the franchise.
Yeah. Do you legitimately? Okay, so let me say this. You brought up there are a bunch of question marks, right, with this team. 100%. I would say that is the biggest reason to think that this is not a good team, right? Yeah. It's not
that uncertainties.
It's just like, okay, Ryan Ellis, backup goalie, injuries to your top center, to your second center, to the fact that your third center hasn't come out yet and you don't have anything beyond that. The fact that you had to buy guys out, the fact that you have James Van Riemsdyk on an expiring terrible contract. There's so many things here that even if you can say guys are good, guys like that guy's good, like Coots is good, there's a question mark. Every single thing comes with like a little caveat. So at this point, Dan, I'm kind of throwing this to you. Do you really think, and I'm not saying like I'm questioning this, but do you really believe that that's where this team will end up? Is that bottom five? Because you said on paper, bottom five. Do you think he will end up squeezing more? Or do you think, and again, this is an early prediction, right? But do you think he'll end up squeezing more? Or do you think this team really will finish bottom five? Because if they did all this and finish bottom five, we kind of win by accident.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I mean, I think he is going to squeeze more out of them
that's what I think
than they probably should finish. I mean, there is some talent on this team, right? A lot of it, as you said, depends on injuries. There's so many question marks. They're clearly not as bad as the Chicago Blackhawks, who are in the midst of a complete tank. They're trading away all their good players. So they're not as bad as the Blackhawks. They're clearly not as bad as the Arizona Coyotes. Those are two teams that they're definitely not as bad at. I tell you what, though, I was struggling to come up with a third team that I could say that they are definitively worse than, other than those top two. Now, there's a bunch of teams kind of in that general 3 through 9 area, right, that there's some uncertainty about. I mean, the Sabres, we think they're going to be better this year, but who knows? Yeah. I mean, the Islanders could be really bad this year. The Devils weren't great last year. They should be better because they have so much young talent. The Canadians, like, who knows, what's going to happen with Carey Price. Like, there's some teams out west that you just don't really know where they're going to be. The San Jose Sharks, like, they could be pretty bad. But if, let's just say Carter Hart gets injured, right? Yeah. I mean, what you've got Felix Sandstrom and Troy Grosenick. Like, so there's, if that happens, or, our first top, it sounds like Ryan Ellis is probably going to be out. I mean, I'd say it's probably greater than a 50% chance that the guy never plays in a Flyers uniform or hockey again. And so they bring in Tony DeAngelo to be Ivan Provorov's partner, and whether or not you like the guy or not, like, all those things aside, he will help the power play. But like, as a first pairing defenseman, the only guys that Ivan Provorov has really had extended success with, Niskanen's really the only guy, and he was a steady at-home defenseman last year. And what was it, a 3 or 4 game sample size with Ellis? Provorov looked really good with a good in his own zone stay-at-home defenseman. He was really good with Shane Gostisbehere for like a month, right? And that sort of seems like an anomaly. DeAngelo is not very good in the defensive zone. And so you just wonder, like, are we in for another up and down year from Ivan Provorov because he doesn't have that steady defensive defenseman with him? And all that being said, I'm more confident in the defense than I am in the forwards because, Sanheim and Ristolainen is a decent second pair. I know a lot of people don't like Ristolainen. I don't love him. I think he's overpaid, but he's okay. And Cam York could take a step forward. Justin Braun's fine on the third pair, but the forward group, especially if Sean Couturier isn't back and healthy. Yeah. And then the guy, James Van Riemsdyk, who literally we were going to have to give a team a first-round pick next year to get them to take him for one season. Insane. And he's going to be he's our top left winger to start the year.
Technically, yeah, by the depth chart. So
because Joel Farabee's out. So JVR is literally our top left wing, and no one in the NHL.
They also bought out Lindblom.
What's that?
They also bought out Lindblom, so he wouldn't even be available.
Yeah, they bought out Lindblom. Like, the left wing depth chart on this team is JVR, Scott Lawton, Noah Cates, and Nicholas Delorier. Like, I mean, oh my God.
Not that great considering like how last season with Giroux in there and Lindblom and Farabee, it was stacked on the left side. So from one season to the next, it's like
I suspect they might
vanished.
try Tippett on that left side at some point.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, just in terms of, I
but
guess if we're
his
going
point
off,
stands.
yeah, if
Your
we're going off like
point stands.
expectations, I kind of agree there. Like I mean, the roster, depending on how it shakes out with injuries and what happens, like you were saying, injury to Carter Hart, and they're definitely bottom 5. Like I can't see them overcoming anything like that. If Hart stays healthy, and I mean Tortorella gets his system employed typically the way he does, and at most stops, aside from like the Vancouver stint for him, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see this team finish anywhere from 8th in the Eastern Conference to like 12th. But I don't see them finishing like 13th, 14th, 15th unless they have terrible injuries. But like you were saying, is that really what the team needs? Like a middling performance where you're not getting the best draft pick in a stacked draft, or would you rather be bottom 5? And that's kind of the dilemma I think that most fans have, that like we already went through essentially a decade almost of mediocrity since, you know, that finals appearance from Richards and Carter team, and then, you know, that one Giroux team that was pretty decent in 2012 there. But other than that, like the team's been pretty mediocre and in that range for the last almost 8-9 seasons. And what has it really done to push the franchise forward? Not much. So it's hard to look and say that there's a lot of things to be positive for. That's for sure. How about you, Yariv, in terms of expectations? Like, what would you say yours are, and upside for the team, or anything like that?
Expectations. I mean, I've been saying this I have no idea what's going to happen, and my expectations are 0 right now. Like, it's not good. It's not bad. When I look at a situation with this many question marks, I see the same thing everybody else does. That I would say, if I'm an outside observer, not from this team, who is not tightly knit and aware of players on here, I would straight up go, this is not a playoff team. There are way too many question marks here to even worry about it. My whole thing is, could there be some things that turn around to get excited about? I think that it's possible. It'll be the working of Torts and what happens on the ice in that locker room. If a guy like Tippett takes off, or Frost or something, or one of these young guys, you know, just like we had Farabee kind of break out. Like if one of those happen, it's something to get excited about. But my expectations right now is I'm expecting a culture change. Like I guess my expectations are super low, and where I really just want to see a semblance of a goddamn real organization again. Like I am not a toughness guy. I've never been. If I was a GM, realistically, I'm probably not even bringing in an enforcer of some kind. I'll have like guys who hit. I'll have bigger, stronger dudes. But like the idea that straight up, like I am an old school hockey guy. No, I'm typically more speed, you know, quickness. Like that's what I would prefer if I built a team. But I have to say, when I look at the combination of the coach, when I look at a guy like D'Angelo, who's annoying as hell, he does have an attitude. You look at Risto, you look at Delorier. If you are a team that is at least trying to make a statement of saying, we know we're not that good, but and I've brought this up before, we're going to be a pain in the ass. If we can at least establish an identity, a real one, where you know this team's not that good, but goddamn are they annoying to play against. And you can even be at the bottom of the league. I don't care. But I want an identity established by the end of the year. That's my expectation. Even if they're bad. If they're bad, like I said, Berard, Tank, I'm in there. Like 100%. Any one of them, like Dan was saying, this is the year to be bad. This is it. So I would even go in that direction. I would try to unload JVR as we move forward. Like I would think that way if I was Fletcher. Do I think he's going to be doing that? No. So I expect the culture change to happen. That's my expectation. And that's what I expect because of Tortorella. I'm not very confident in Chuck Fletcher. And I think you'd be crazy to say that you are right now. That's kind of where I'm at. Dan, I'm not sure if you kind of live in that plane right now. I know at times we haven't agreed on players, but like I said, there's not much to argue here that you can't be excited about what Chuck Fletcher has done as GM. There is no clear direction, whether they want to say there is or not.
Yeah, I thought there was going to be a lot of moves this offseason. And
me too.
I thought that maybe Travis Konechny might be traded. You know, I know which I would have been fine with. I don't think I would have wanted them to move Provorov, but there were rumors he might get moved. Obviously, that didn't happen. You know, they're just for so much talk that there was going to be so much aggression this offseason, it just didn't materialize. And I think it's not hard to look at the salary cap and see why that happened. I mean, it's, it was sort of this comical press conference with Dave Scott last year, or earlier this year, I guess, actually, where they were talking about, the open checkbook that Comcast has got. And anyone who knows, the salary cap situation the team was in, you knew that, well, he can say that, but it doesn't make any difference for the players, right?
Yeah.
So it obviously, so he's talking about the coach. They opened the checkbook for Tortorella, right? And who knows what else behind the scenes they're opening the checkbook for. But really where it matters the most with the players, there just wasn't that much to be done. And Chuck Fletcher, I would say that his asset management that we've seen the last number of seasons is maybe the worst that I've ever seen from an NHL GM. I mean, it's just preposterous the way that this guy gets fleeced in trades. He just backs himself into corners where the guys have no value. They put Shane Gostisbehere on waivers. I get it. No one picked him up. It's hard in the middle of the season to pick up a guy like that. But what that creates is a situation where in the offseason, when you're trying to trade him, you have to send away a second round pick just to get someone else to take it, right? And then they move all these assets for Rasmus Ristolainen, who they thought was going to be a huge help last season. They moved a first round pick and a second round pick. And then instead of trading him at the deadline this year, when you could have gotten a first round pick back, instead you re-sign him. So you're sort of doubling down on the mistake that he made in that trade. And then you could have had Tony DeAngelo last year for nothing. No one wanted Tony DeAngelo. Instead, he has a good season last year, and now you have to give up a second, third, and a fourth round pick to acquire him. And so he's probably a little bit of a better defenseman than Shane Gostisbehere, but not that much better. And so now you're in a situation where you literally had to move a second round pick to get someone to take Ghost. Meanwhile, you're trading 3 picks to get DeAngelo. You've bungled the Ristolainen thing. Everyone knows that you're trying to clear cap space to go after Johnny Gaudreau. And to do that, you have to trade James Van Riemsdyk. And so every NHL GM in the league knows, hey, we're not going to take JVR unless he gives us a first round pick or a second round pick. Well, the problem with the second round picks is they didn't have any. Like, the Flyers have no second round picks the next 3 years because of all these awful trades that Chuck has made. No one's going to take a third round pick for JVR. So you're in the situation where you have to give up a first round pick to get someone to take JVR. He drew the line at that, apparently. And so you couldn't go get Johnny Gaudreau. I mean, it's like the most insane asset management that I've ever seen.
It would talk to that too many cooks thing too, right?
Yeah, that they're not sure what they want to do, really.
Yeah.
So.
Well, we were talking about it a little bit earlier, like, and I know I believe you're a marketing director or something like that, full-time?
Yeah, marketing, sales, that kind of stuff.
Okay, yeah. So you worked in corporate environments, right? And
oh, yeah.
I'm sure you
worked. I worked in a corporate hockey environment. I worked for a minor league hockey team.
Oh, cool.
That's awesome. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
I was a play-by-play announcer.
Oh, you got a great voice, so actually that makes sense.
My play-by-play voice was a little different than my normal everyday. I'd make it a little bit deeper, But yeah, you can go watch on YouTube some calls of fights that I had.
Oh, that's awesome.
Kind of fun every now and again to go back and look at it. And we had some wild bus trips because all of our trips were on the bus. So yeah,
the team go all like with the team bus with the announcers and stuff, right?
Yeah, it was the Missouri River Otters, and it was fun because one of the years that I was there was the year the NHL was on strike, and so we had like 4 NHL guys on the team, and then we played against the Detroit team, and they had Chris Chelios and Darian Hatcher.
Oh, that's awesome!
And actually, Sean Avery was on the team, and I think Brian Smolinski was on one of the teams. But there was it was pretty cool. It was that one year was pretty slick. And anyway, yeah, I've worked in corporate environments and hockey corporate environments, so I definitely know what it's like.
That's awesome. That's good inside news there. Info there. Yeah. So the reason I was bringing it up though is when something goes wrong in typically corporate or even like larger companies, even smaller companies too, it's like there's this immediate like rush for everybody to get their hands in there, right? From like your boss to the other people to all this. It's like, oh, what happened? How are you responsible? Who's responsible? How can I help? And I feel like that kind of happened when everything went wrong. And I think we kind of saw, no, you got to bring Toughness back. No, you got to get rid of this contract. Oh, you got to go out and get Johnny Gaudreau. And then somebody goes, but you can't move the 2013 first, right? So it's kind of like somebody's pulling him this way. Somebody's pulling him that. That's almost what it seems like from the outside. And it's almost like he's listening to different groups of the fan base to make his decision, which I have so little interest in. Like that is so terrible. I'd rather have a GM where I have no idea what's going on and you just show up and win a trade on television. And I love that you talked about this, Dan, because we've harped on this over and over again on this podcast. The continuous asset management. And again, people say I'm positive online. This is a big reason why I'm positive about players, because I believe if you do not value them, the rest of the league will not. If you do not believe in your players, they won't either. They'll have no reason to. If you waive them, their value goes down. You need to keep their value as high as possible. You trade them, fine. Everybody is tradable. Wayne Gretzky was traded, but get your max value. We have not done that. And you can't even say outside of the Niskin, and I do believe that was a great trade for the Flyers. Outside of that trade, I look at majority of trades that he made and I go, he lost. You overpaid for what you got. And I didn't get Hextall made a lot of mistakes, but he didn't get ripped off like that. Not on a regular basis. He had some bad trades, but he had some good ones too. And I don't know, man. Like everything that you're saying, Dan, like as you're going through it, it's like in the back, it's like, how does he survive the season?
Other than the team making the playoffs out of the blue, that'd be the only way. That'd be the only way, I would say.
But he hasn't set himself up for that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. He hasn't done the best job, obviously, as you guys have outlined with the asset management. And just harping back to that, I mean, has there been really definitively, other than that Niskanen trade, I don't think there's been any trade like you were saying that he's actually won, which is concerning because, I mean, if you're another GM kind of looking at the Flyers and saying, well, look at all the trades.
The Braun trade.
Yeah, the Braun trade was decent, but even a second and a third, like value.
No, I mean, he traded a third and then signed him in the offseason. That's
there you
a
go.
win-win, I guess.
Yeah. But like even when you look at just like all the trades he's making, if you're a GM in the league and you say, well, who can I call and who can I get, the best value from without having to give up a lot or them having actually to pay me? And they're probably thinking Chuck Fletcher is very high on that list because if looking at the track record, why wouldn't they, right? Like he typically doesn't make great trades. And I think the thing that compounds it the most is, I mean, he backed himself with the salary cap with the Ristolainen signing and D'Angelo, really, and you could have got a Gaudreau in there who could have been a difference maker for you maybe in the future, maybe not next season in terms of actually competing or anything, but he would have been more of a difference maker than probably those two combined. I would agree on that, or would say that. And I mean, he wasn't able to execute with that. And the thing is, though, you limit yourself to no cap space like that, but there isn't even any creativity and outside of the box type of thinking where like, let's go sign a Dylan Strome, let's look for a Kubalik. Let's look for a young guy we can maybe bring in that might add some talent or might, mesh in with the other younger players that we have. And he didn't even look to do that. And that's the thing that's the most, I think, concerning for me is that there's no outside the box or creativity in terms of like what he's doing and the moves he's making. It's all just like cookie cutter type moves, like getting a Delorier, getting a Braun, like guys a guy you might need for your fourth line. Sure. He's probably one of the worst forwards in hockey. You probably shouldn't have signed him. Like Justin Braun, I mean, third pairing defenseman, you need him, sure, but could you have signed somebody else that might have had a bigger upside in that role or who might not be as established? I don't know, right? And that's the thing. It's like you don't see any of those value type deals like you would have from other GMs, maybe.
I said this, right? He made signings as if he's refining a playoff team.
Yeah, exactly, which is not a good thing because it isn't a playoff team.
Right.
I mean, the only trade that he's made where right after it happened, I was like, wow, what a great trade. This guy, like, this was creatively done, was the Nolan Patrick and, Phil Myers trade for Ryan Ellis.
Yeah.
And we saw what happened there. I mean, you absolutely have to think that
no luck
they knew that something was wrong with that guy, right?
Oh, yeah.
Listen, maybe they didn't, but it just seems awful fishy that that they traded one of the top right-handed defenseman in the league on a decent contract for two relatively unproven players with a lot of question marks. And then all of a sudden Ellis is out, after 4 games, and he may never play hockey again. Like, and that was the one trade where you're like, oh, you know what? This was creatively done by Chuck Fletcher. On the other trades are just like, I guess trading for the rights to negotiate with Kevin Hayes was like sort of creative, but not really.
Breaking barriers.
But he also paid him a lot of money.
Before. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he paid him a lot of money. Yeah, there hasn't been a lot of creativity from Chuck Fletcher.
Not
at all. Yeah.
Well, let me ask you guys this, and I want to talk about this monster trade that just happened, because I think it was, to me, it's a humongous trade. The keep the Chuck trade that we saw. Obviously, we saw Uyghur move a prospect, can't remember the name at the moment, first, and then obviously Jonathan Huberdeau, who was their MVP last year for Florida, who had an excellent season. Obviously, so did Chuck. But I looked at a trade like this, and there's a lot of nuance behind this trade. Obviously, one guy wants out, the other guy wants a lot of money. They have, I'm sure Florida's got their own plans. Like, this didn't happen by accident. They threw a ton of value at Calgary for this pick. Like, this is the opposite of a Chuck Fletcher, return. So they got a monster return. But I do see the investment in a guy like Chuck. I get it. There seems to be a large investment, not just by the Flyers, but the NHL overall, in toughness. So when I look at some of the things that Fletcher has done, while I am extremely skeptical of them, like everybody else, I am noticing this like just high premium on physicality, probably the highest I have seen in quite a bit. Are you guys seeing that as well? And I don't mean just like, it makes me think that Delorier might have had that much competition for him, because teams are like losing their mind, where they're like, well, we want to be the biggest, strongest, fastest. But again, Fletcher made moves like he's a playoff team. Like when the Rangers brought in Reeves and they're like, oh, we're a playoff team. We just, we don't want to get out muscled again. Like,
yeah.
But do you guys see that? Sorry.
I would say in terms of toughness, there definitely seems to be a premium. I mean, like, you see it with all the good teams or the contending teams in the league, right? Like, they try to add in certain guys that, can play the game and contribute on the ice, but also bring a certain skill set where they can, contribute to a heavy hitting, forechecking type style, like a Blake Coleman, goes from Tampa to Calgary. You get a Barclay Goodrow goes from Tampa to the Rangers. I mean, you get the Penguins a couple of years ago. I believe trading for Ryan Reeves for a first round pick and Oscar Sundqvist. Or was it St. Louis that made that trade? Either way, but I think the Penguins from St. Louis. But either way, I mean, you do see a big premium for sure on toughness. And with the Chuck trade specifically, I mean, like, he is a guy that can play on your top line, produce a ton of points for you, and contribute pretty much all facets of the ice, but also be a really tough player. And then you saw what, Florida gave up, which is a huge package. So I would definitely say there is a big thing on toughness right now in the league. The only question for me, at least from a Flyers perspective, is like, all those guys that I mentioned can play the game at a pretty decent level and contribute on the ice. I don't know if a guy like a Delorier is going to be able to do that. I mean, in terms of the metrics, like 5-on-5 analytics, things like that, he's noticeably been one of the bottom 10 players in the league for the last 3 seasons. So, like, I'm not typically an analytics driven guy, but seeing that for season on end does not inspire confidence for me.
Well, he's the Sam Morin success story. It was like an offensive defenseman that they converted to be a forward.
Yeah, because he used to play defense,
he was tough,
right?
Yeah, because he was really tough. So,
I think that, for me, that the teams that have been upgrading for toughness are, as you guys sort of alluded to, are the teams trying to get over the hump in the playoffs, right? Like, Florida identified that they wanted to have a little bit more sandpaper in their game, and also, both, Huberdeau's was he an unrestricted free agent at the end of next season?
I think so. Yep.
And I guess is Uyghur too, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So, I think that obviously went into it. Huberdeau's a UFA at the end of next season. Mackenzie Uyghur's a UFA at the end of next season. So Florida was probably, that obviously had something to do with it. A lot of people think it was an overpay. They identified a skill set they wanted, and we saw what turned Tampa's corner for winning the cup was when they added some of those tough guys on the fourth line. But you've got to have the talent up front to go along with it, and the Flyers don't. I don't think there's been a lot of like bottom 5 teams that have been like, we've got to go and get tougher, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's like Bobby Clark saying that. Or, also someone had brought up the point that John Tortorella's got a 4-year deal. Delorier signed a 4-year deal. Like maybe, I think Tortorella had brought
Nick
up.
said he called him. Delorier said that Tortorella called him.
I think Tortorella in one of the press conferences brought up a fight that Delorier had or something before they signed him. So part of me wonders if he's a guy that Tortorella wanted the Flyers to sign.
I think so. I do. I do think so.
How much toughness do you need in the lineup? I mean, I guess maybe they're worried they're not going to be able to re-sign Zach McEwen, who
I think they offered him a 2-way contract.
Yeah,
that's why he went to arbitration.
Yeah,
and
there's not much room for him in the lineup realistically if you look at the players and the depth chart.
I think they gave his spot to Delorier, and then gave him a bad offer.
Personally, for me, like, how can in this day and age of the NHL where it's like speed, skill, that's the main thing that you need to ice a team to be competitive. We could all agree on that. Like, I just can't see you putting together a fourth line that has McEwen and Delorier. You got to pick one or the other. And I mean, based on the contract, it looks like they picked Delorier, right?
I don't know. It's the Broad Street Bullies. You never know. I mean, the fourth line of Delorier, Patrick Brown, and Zach McEwen looks pretty appetizing.
It looks
one of the worst in the league.
It looks very middling Flyers, and it's not even a knock on any one of them individually. Like I've been
just
talking
collectively as a line. Like that's not a good line. Like
okay, so let's talk about this for a second because this isn't on the topic list or anything, but I've been thinking about this lately. We're very used to as a team throwing whatever on the fourth line, right? And you can make a case those guys have value in their own right, but realistically, they're the leftover line, right? You're like, I only had, I'm putting all my best players here, and this, but like we know, and you can make a case that maybe the team can't afford to do this, but we know that if we throw Scott Lawton as a fourth line center with almost any combination of wingers, it will be an effective line immediately. And we can roll 4 lines. If I'm John Tortorella, I'm thinking about making 4 lines, using Lawton as a bottom 6 center because really don't have a better option. Like Brown is not better than Lawton in the middle on the fourth line, and trying to drive play there. You have enough young defensemen. And I wanted to ask you, as this is on our topic list, we have a lot of guys who are kind of on the brink of making this team, and we'll talk about Brink too. But we have a lot of guys who are on the brink of making this team, one of which is Isaac Ratcliffe. And I see a guy like Ratcliffe maybe making the team out of camp, even just because of what he brings overall and the fact that he's a young guy who you could play on the fourth line rather than some of the smaller, more undersized guys. And I don't know. I see that stuff, and I don't really know what our lines are going to be. I'm kind of expecting Tortorella to bring in some stuff that we might not like, and then some stuff that people don't anticipate. Like people are joking Delorier playing on the third line. I would not be shocked if we see that at some point.
Yeah, possible.
But I do think about that as Lawton in the middle of this like line. You have a healthy Allison. There's all these question marks. Like I even say, you have a healthy Allison, right? Like,
who knows? Like, the thing is, for me, like with the fourth line and the thing that it's the fourth line at the end of the day. So there's obviously bigger fish to fry and more things to be concerned with in terms of a roster. It's just like you have so many young players and guys that really haven't cracked the NHL lineup, like a Lisinski, Allison, Ratcliffe, things like that. Like, how can you afford to sign more fourth line depth role guys when you have so many of those younger guys? Like, if you're not going to be a good team, you might as well at least evaluate what you have in these guys at the NHL level. And then at least it shows a semblance of a plan to be like, okay, the team's evaluating some of their younger players. Maybe they can see where they go from there, depending on their next steps and how it plays into, seasons in the future. But it doesn't even look like they're being poised to do that. So then what happens to these young guys with another, AHL season potentially? Like, are they ever going to get a crack at it? Maybe they're just AHLers, but like either way, you're going to be bad. So might as well give it a shot. I don't know. That's my thought.
I think if a kid comes in, and a lot of these guys aren't kids anymore. I mean, one of the reasons that Isaac Ratcliffe will probably make the roster is that he's not waivers exempt anymore.
Yeah, so exactly.
If they send down Isaac Ratcliffe, 6'6" second round pick, like I'm guessing someone's going to take a chance on him.
Yeah.
Especially when people around the league know that the Flyers are not very good at developing young talent. So I was just thinking it'll be hilarious when some of these guys who like we've deemed aren't good enough to play in the Flyers lineup, one of the worst lineups in hockey, go somewhere else and sort of are contributors.
We saw
it a little bit with Nicolas Aube-Kubel, even though Colorado waived him. But, we waived him and Colorado picks him up and he was a part of their Stanley Cup.
Yeah, and they're one of the best teams in the league. So they obviously see talent.
Right. The development that this organization has had has been non-existent. It's been piss poor. And you just wonder, does a Morgan Frost not make it here and then go somewhere else and figure it out and light it up? Is the same thing going to be true for Isaac Ratcliffe? I don't know. I mean, what level should Travis Konechny and Ivan Provorov be at? Is it a developmental problem in the organization? I'm not sure, but there's just been so much stagnation from the young players on this roster that it just makes you wonder. And Scott Laughton, just to answer your question, Yariv, I mean, the problem is that because of how bad the top of the lineup is, he almost has to play in on the first or second line to start the season. Otherwise, you're going to have Noah Cates on the second line, which
I'm in for it. That's what I'm saying.
Right.
I think that's what we should do.
So maybe that's what happens. But I do agree that it'd be nice to see these. If Allison can be healthy, let's see what he can do. Hopefully, they can sign Owen Tippett and see what he can do. Tanner Laczynski, let's get him in the lineup.
Yeah,
all these guys, and
I mean, you already know what a Brown is, what a McEwen, what a Delorier are. So might as well get the younger guys.
Well, let's talk about Laczynski actually, because he just signed that new contract, right? Which the first year of the contract is a 2-way, second year of the contract is a 1-way, which I think is a little bit telling as far as where the Flyers kind of see him.
Yeah,
but I look at a guy like Laczynski, seems to have all the tools. And Dan, I'm going to ask you this one directly first. When you see a guy like Laczynski after the injuries, right? Even though he finished well in the AHL, and you look at that fourth line role, and you look at a guy like Patrick Brown, you look at McEwen, Delorier. There's not a bunch of names there at the bottom of that lineup that necessarily stick out. Is this an opportunity, realistic one, for Laczynski to take this C and a fourth line? Do you think they're even going to consider that, or you think they're going to be like, well, even if you're even, it's not your time yet?
I think they're going to consider anything. I mean, Tortorella's coming in. I think the guys that catch his attention are going to have a chance to play from day one. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any set. I don't think they're going to come in saying, "Oh, Patrick Brown is our, he's going to be our fourth line center." Tanner Laczynski is one of my favorite under the radar Flyers prospects. Noah Cates was heading into last season. I was telling people how good he was, and he came in and he kind of showed it. But I feel sort of the same way about Laczynski. Cates has not really had many injury problems. Laczynski's had a lot, so not as many as Wade Allison. But Laczynski he had a couple really good seasons in college, and he can score, but he also can do the little things that coaches like. I mean, in that sense, he's a lot like Noah Cates. Probably not the same upside that Cates has, but if Laczynski comes in and he's healthy and he can stay healthy, I think he'll have a decent. I think he'll break camp with the team. I think, but you never know. And I think that he's got a decent chance to be the fourth line center.
Would you right now prefer him over Patrick Brown?
Oh, of course I would.
Easily.
I would prefer him over Patrick Brown.
So let's think about this for a second, because we're very trained to assume that that's not going to happen, right? We as Flyers fans, we're very trained for that. We know all the other coaches that have come through town. They're putting Patrick Brown in there. You know what I mean? He's the veteran center who is adequate defensively, is physical. He's got the baseline down. But do you think there's any chance that with somebody like Tortorella, that we'll see? He's not this guy. That's why I'm not high on this idea. But do you think we'll see an opportunity for some of these guys? Because you said they're not that young anymore. Like Wade Allison's not that young. They're not kids. They're mid-20s. I believe
they're like 25. Yeah. So.
This is the time for a guy like
they'll all have opportunities. I mean, I think Delorier is probably a cinch to be in the opening night roster, right?
Based on the contract.
Yeah, I think that Delorier will be there, but that's just one part of that fourth line. I think the fourth line center and fourth line right wing are still up in the air. I think.
I agree. I would say it's really just up to interpretation in terms of how players perform in camp. how they kind of fit into Tortorella's systems in camp, as well as like how they execute what he's, looking for on the ice and what he kind of sees. And then from that point, it's really just a competition between all those kind of guys that are on the bubble there for the fourth line and who's going to outperform in a setting like that. Personally, like, you already know my opinion, Yariv, like, I would love to see Lisinski there over Brown. I don't know if it's going to happen. I mean, you got to pray the guy stays healthy. That's the first thing. Cause I think even last year that injury he suffered was in camp. Right. So got to hope he can get through camp and just stay healthy there. But he's very, very intriguing. And you know what? They only signed him to a deal that's a cap hit of $762,000. So basically the league minimum for a guy that, can contribute and can score if he has the opportunity to do so. 17 points last year in 28 games for the Phantoms. That's coming off, a pretty big injury and surgery. So he's not even probably fully up to 100% at that point. So I'm excited to maybe, see what he can do if he gets the opportunity, but I guess we'll have to see, obviously.
Yeah. I feel like I've been waiting on Tanner forever. Kind of have been. Do you guys think that anybody will fall way below expectations? Like you could say JVR or whatever, but expectations are already low. Is anybody you think will maybe find their way off of this team?
It's hard because our expectations are not that
so
high
low.
With any players, right? I will not be shocked. I will not be shocked if like Carter Hart has a bad season, right? That wouldn't shock me.
Young goalie,
you just don't know. He's been somewhat up and down in his career. He's going to have Tony DeAngelo out there as a top pairing right-handed defenseman. I don't know. I wouldn't be stunned if Carter Hart has a fairly bad season.
Yeah, I would say I don't want to single out Hart in general. I would just say the goaltending altogether, I don't know if they're going to have the greatest season just based on like the defense, and then also just who Carter Hart's backups could potentially be. So I'm going to, it's not
I just like, I keep going back to just being like, there is no goddamn direction. Because even if you can say, like I was thinking about the comment I made earlier about how, this team made moves like they're a playoff team.
Yeah.
But then you look at the backup goaltender situation, they did not make moves like they were playoff.
And they
team.
have two guys that have basically only played in AHL games, essentially.
Even prior to that, Fedotov is still a question mark too. I have high hopes for him too. And honestly,
but he hasn't played in the NHL yet. So
none of this makes any goddamn sense. I can make the case where the DeAngelo, though I completely agree with your comment. I've said that too on here, Dan, about overpaying later when you could have got the guy for nothing creatively. And
that goes back to the creative thing that like there just isn't that there to identify that.
I did hear this, Dan. I don't know if this is true, but I did hear that there was an offer out to DeAngelo from the Flyers the previous year, and Fletcher tried to sign him, and it was nixed because of his problems. So that's why when he was available,
what changed?
What changed within a year? The only thing that makes sense is that they saw him go to Carolina. He wasn't a complete mess there, so like, look, he can clean himself up, and we can bring him in. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Yeah. Again, I don't know what's true anymore. At this point, I would not be making the moves that Fletcher is making. So I have no idea what he's going to do. That's why I'm not even trying to predict the goddamn thing. Yeah. But let's talk about some more bad news while we're at it. Bobby Brink out for 5 months, surgery. I think everybody kind of knew surgery was coming, and this is not an easy surgery. So even when he comes back, like if you're listening to this, I would not expect him in the NHL next year.
No,
I expect
with a hip too. Like it's all involved in the skating stride, right? So
it's
like
possible.
It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
Realistically, it's crazy what's happened with prospects in this organization. I mean, they all get injured. Like
everything.
Every single
one
of them. Morgan Frost, shoulder surgery. Tyson Forster, shoulder surgery. Zayd Wisdom with like shoulder surgery too, maybe.
Yeah.
Wade Allison is injured all the time. Bobby Brink, hip surgery. Like, who is
Sam Moran? We didn't
even
get to play.
Zamula was hurt too recently. I'm pretty sure. So
it's a guy.
You go down.
Farabee.
Isaac Ratcliffe has had a ton of different injuries.
Yeah.
Yes. Farabee has had some injuries.
Lazinski had the surgery last year. I mean, it's insane.
Jay O'Brien. Didn't
I'm
even
kind of
make it up here
wondering,
yet.
like, is that just a coincidence? Like, is it a coincidence that so many young guys that are in your prospect pool can get injured? Like, I mean, we don't have insight into the medical staff, the training regimens, like what's going on. I'd have to assume it is just because, like, it's all younger dudes. They're not training at Flyers facilities, most likely. Most of them are probably training on their own or like with their AHL team, or not AHL team, I mean, college team. Or like OHL team or something like that. So like, I'm just wondering, like, what's your guys' perspective? Do you think it's just all dumb luck at that point, or like, just is there some sort of theme? Because like, it does look like there is a theme. I just don't know if there actually concretely is something to back that up. You know?
Dan, you want to go first?
I mean, it's one thing if they were all guys like playing for the Flyers and they were getting injured and with their whatever their practice habits are or whatever. I mean, it's hard to think that these guys getting injured in games or like is somehow a reflection of the Flyers training staff. I don't think the Flyers training staff has been very good. I mean, we've seen guys rush back from injuries and then get re-injured all the time. Right. So my level of confidence is very low in the Flyers training staff. I'm just not sure if it's fair to blame them, for like Bobby Brink.
Yeah, I'd have to agree, right?
Joel Farabee. Oh, another one, Joel Farabee, whatever he had injured, like that's unbelievable. But
bad luck, unfortunately.
But I mean, maybe there is something about how they don't educate these kids enough about like what good training habits are, so you don't get injured. How to protect yourself in games so that like Tyson Forster's not getting like vaulted into the boards and injuring his shoulder. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to blame them too much for some of these prospect injuries, but yeah, that would be my take.
Yeah. Look, I the rational side of me, and push comes to shove, that's where my brain is typically. In the back of my mind, I think of the saying, luck is when opportunity meets preparation. This team has not had luck almost at all, you can say. They've been unlucky across the board. At a certain point, I start thinking preparation. I'm like, how unlucky can you fucking be? Like everywhere for everything? Some of it is self-inflicted. Do I think the Bobby Brink one is? No, I think that's crazy for me to be like, the Flyers got him injured. But I do think of stuff where like, maybe there's pressure within the organization to get bigger or stronger or to hit a certain condition level or something is expressed to them and they they overtrain and they get injured in the off season,
or pressure to come back and help the team. Like, and I think that might be the biggest one, whereas like you're a Hayes or a Farabee last season where really you should have shut things down instead of rushing back because the team's bad anyway. But then, the pressure from the team and just how the culture is like, well, we want our players to play through anything and, and come back and contribute and help the team where they can. And I think that's where things kind of get a little bit worrisome is like, just because a guy's injured, I know it's hockey and, there's a culture of like, you want to be tough, you want to play through anything. But if you're severely hurt, you shouldn't be playing through things like that. Right. So like, I think that's something that for sure the team kind of needs to address and make sure that isn't a constant going forward where guys, are always playing hurt or playing through stuff. And I mean, as somebody who's played the game and like who's watched for forever, like obviously you see guys play through injuries, that's hockey, but there's certain points where you kind of got to draw the line. I think especially if the team isn't doing very well from a performance standpoint, which the team hasn't. Right.
I'm actually listening to this book. This is the second book by this author. His name is Tim Grover.
Okay.
It's actually a pretty famous book. The one I'm listening to is his new book called Winning. His previous one is called Relentless. He was the trainer for Michael Jordan, for Kobe Bryant. He was like their one-on-one guy. They hired him. He's the best in the business. And he talks about this. And he brought up injuries recently in one of the chapters I'm listening to. And he goes, are you getting injured all the time? Are you finding your way not able to make your way through the season? And the Flyers have a lot of guys like that who that's consistently happening to. And he refers to it. He goes, I would look at what you're doing, how they're sleeping, how they're eating. At the same time, I am starting to look at the organization and be like, look, I am not saying you are responsible for all these people getting injured. But like Dan was saying, are they educating them in the right way to prevent these injuries are we there? It's always a trickle down effect. And the trickle down effect is that everything that is coming top down is breaking.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at that and I go, I can't help but blame them at this point. And I wasn't like this at all, but I'm kind of like, I don't even care if it's your fault anymore. I'm kind of just like, you got bad juju.
It's hard to have confidence in any component of this organization at this point.
Yeah.
Right?
And you know,
down type of.
Dan. Yeah, no,
Yariv,
you are one of the most positive guys on Twitter. Absolutely. You and Jamie are like super positive all the time. But it's like impossible to be positive.
You can't do it. Team. You can't do it right now. You be
one of the things that, and I put a poll up on Twitter that was like, do you think that, will any of the following players, become a star offensive performer this season? I think that there's a chance, a non-0% chance that a guy like Morgan Frost or Owen Tippett,
I would agree,
or Cam York could like take a major step forward this season.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And really become a very good offensive player, right? I mean, Morgan Frost clearly has the skills to do that. He just needs to take a big step forward in his assertiveness and his confidence, right? But he clearly has the talent for it. Owen Tippett, we saw how many shots he was getting, right? Yeah. The last few months of the season. I mean, he was getting a ton of shots. He just couldn't finish. But he's a guy who his skating impressed me too. He could score a lot of goals this year. Owen Tippett could take a big step forward. He was a highly thought of player. Some people had him in the top 5 the year that he was drafted. And Cam York, obviously they took him pretty high. He, to me, has a ton of unlocked offensive potential. I was comparing him to like a video game character who you're like needs an upgrade, right? Like you're Mario, got to hit that box and get that mushroom and like upgrade. And he's got a lot of talent, and he sort of has played it safe a lot of the time. But I think that there's sort of there's additional levels that Cam York can get to. So I think any one of those 3 guys could take like a significant step forward this season. That's one of the things I'm the most looking forward to seeing. But that doesn't mean I think it's going to happen. It might not.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with all of that. And actually, I was going to ask like who you guys think is the most likely to break out of like, I guess, the younger batch of guys. I guess you could include some older guys. Mine is Tippett. Just everything I've seen, the tool set, the fact that there were no centers here, his role in the team, the importance of fixing the power play, the shot that he has. Like nobody shoots like him on our team. Nobody's got all the skill sets like he does. And you don't really have anybody competing with you for that spot.
No.
So I do see like this could be his first, season where it doesn't look like we lost the Giroux trade, years later, that maybe we actually hit on this guy.
I mean, I think there's a good amount of candidates that you could say that have the potential to break out, like you were saying, Dan. The 3 guys that you put that poll up about, those are probably the 3 main ones that most fans and people would likely pinpoint. I mean, they all are young enough still, all have, considerable amount of talent that you can visibly see on the ice, just hasn't always translated in terms of goals. Just to add to like your point as well, Dan, Bill Meltzer posted something on Twitter, this a while ago. I kind of dug it up because I know we had this topic planned. And per Natural Stat Trick, the Flyers all situations expected goals share leaders for last season. The first 2 of them were Owen Tippett and Morgan Frost for the whole season for expected goals, 4 there. So, I mean, it kind of just shows that like they were creating a ton of offensive scoring chances, but they just weren't capitalizing on them. So, I mean, you have to think that like they can know how to create the chances, but can they get to the point and can they become those players where they ultimately finish those chances like they did at those lower levels? And I think that's where like the eureka moment is either going to hit for them or it never will. And they're just going to be decent, decent players that can create those chances, but they're not always going to finish on them. Personally, for me, and just like who I think would have the best chance to break out, I'd go with you as well, Yariv. You know how much I really like Tippett and just like the way he plays. Most intriguing part is just his release, right? Like this guy gets the puck off his stick so quickly that like goaltenders just have a hard time tracking it. I think the main problem is, and we could probably all attest to this from watching a lot of games last season, is that he's not very accurate a lot with the shot. Like you'd see on the power play, they'd set him up sometimes for some big shots and then he'd miss the net, even though there's like a huge screen where if that would have hit the net, probably would be a goal, right? So I think it's certain habits that these guys need to almost kind of make sure they execute on to get to the next level in the NHL. You're hoping like Tortorella motivates them and brings something out of them that might help them, unlock that and get to that further level, obviously. But we'll have to just wait and see. But I mean, there are young guys that do have talent and can definitely contribute. It's just what extent will that be, and will that ultimately happen on the Flyers or elsewhere? Who knows?
Yeah.
Once again, back to the question marks, because there's a lot of them.
Dan, would you say those 3 players that you listed, are those your candidates for a breakout?
Yeah, they would be my top 3 candidates. I mean, I think that Wade Allison, if he can stay healthy, certainly has a chance. I think his release is like every bit as good as Owen Tippett. He's got a fantastic shot. He just can't stay healthy. Right? And, for me, again, the guy I'd like to see break out is Morgan Frost. I've taken some heat on Twitter for my, I'm a big fan of his game, but also I can also acknowledge that like he has not taken that next step and like I said, I think for him, it's being more assertive and the confidence. And the good thing about Tortorella is he's going to come in and we're going to find out about these kids, like sink or swim, right? Like
that's
Morgan
what
Frost
he goes through pretty much.
Yeah, like Morgan Frost, maybe he'll be a huge boon to his game, and he'll blossom, or maybe Morgan Frost will become a shrinking violet, and won't be able to put up with the pressure from Tortorella. Same thing for Tippett, same thing for York. So I think that Tortorella coming in is going to be good for the fans to kind of help us figure out, what we have with some of these young players.
It's interesting what you're saying about Frost, and I'm still high on him too.
Yeah.
He might actually be the most important player going, or I guess X factor going into next season. Like if you really want to turn this ship around and you really want a player to turn it around and hit for you, if for some miracle, right, we start off next season and Morgan Frost is lights out and is on a 70-point pace or something, just out of nowhere, finally gets to the point, or even 60-point, right? But just becomes a legit player, that type of occurrence is enough to get life out of the fan base, life out of your team. And that's why I was talking about Lawton in the middle. Be strong down the middle, put some risks on the wing, like a guy like Tippett, like we're talking about. I don't have a problem. Put Cates with Couturier. It could be amazing combination theoretically. The guy's got a lot of complementary talent. And, I kind of look at it that way, as like, if you put people in the right positions, I think we could see it. And I hope Frost breaks out. The one guy, it's interesting. You said you could see Hart taking a step back. I don't see him taking a step back. I could see it being a case where it's the same, where the team sucks defensively and it just doesn't matter. You'll never be that good. And I don't think you can be very good if
a goalie is just as good as his defense usually.
It is, and a great goalie can make up for bad defense too. But
only to a certain extent, though, right?
To a certain extent, but it's also like there is no consistency for him in that position. There has never been. Like, if we can get a goddamn system going here, I don't want him to just walk in and do well. I want Sandstrom to come in and do well. I want to be the type of team that you can throw a young goalie in and the structure, the team excels, right? So, and then that's the guy, if we really want to think about it, who could take the biggest jump if things do go well defensively.
Yeah.
That is one guy that could be on the map again as far as the league paying attention.
If they have a structure around him and just like,
it's all theoretical.
I think the main thing really with the Flyers and their defensive play is going to more be the forwards coming back. Like if you watched last season, the forwards did not support the defense at all, really, in terms of the back check. So like if you're playing an
also made bad passes.
They made bad passes too. But like if you're a defense and you see your forwards never coming back to support you, like in terms of morale and how you're going to execute your system, are you going to be doing it to the most effective that you can when you know that your forwards aren't helping you out either? This all plays into the team dynamics, everything like that.
This team did not have a coach for the past 2 years. That's the one thing I take away. And, talking to Nasty more the other day, it's like AV should have not been coach of this team. Definitely not last year. And probably should have been fired during those Rangers games where they got blown out twice in a row.
I mean, from the inside.
Dan's been watching this team for a long time. Dan, let me ask you something. When you saw those moments of the Flyers just getting embarrassed, like some of the worst losing I've ever seen, to the point where you're like, they're not even close to trying. They're not even bad. They're not even trying. were you surprised that AV was still coach after those games? And we saw it both seasons.
I mean, those Rangers games were some of the worst games I've ever seen. I mean, you had Zibanejad scoring like 87 goals against the team in 2 games, and there's no response. And you could just tell that Vigneault didn't have much of an interest either in being here.
Yeah.
And from what I'd heard, it was Dave Scott that came down, and like Chuck Fletcher wasn't prepared to fire Vigneault. And this was, the season after those embarrassing games. And because they get blown out on a Sunday, I guess. I forget who it was against, Tampa or something.
Yeah.
And Dave Scott just like made them fire Vigneault. And it was, it was a little baffling. And Vigneault's assistant coaches were just, Michel Therrien was just a complete train wreck. Again, it's so much of what has gone on here. It's just been totally baffling and depressing, and a lack of direction and a lack of a plan. And our GM looks like he shows up at these press conferences like a disheveled homeless man. And he just lies to people. He told Charlie O'Connor, this is a retool, Charlie.
Oh, that was the best thing ever. Well, obviously not actually, but
that was a funny press conference because Charlie was the only one there. And he just kept asking questions, but it's depressing right now.
I was actually with Charlie a couple of days afterwards at the 5-on or the 3-on-3 tournament.
Yeah.
And I was talking to him about it a little bit, and obviously I'm like, kudos to you. And we were trying to figure out like, why would you lie?
Yeah.
Why even lie?
What do you have to gain?
The only thing I can think of, and you guys tell me if you think there's any, again, I'm grasping at straws here. I'm like, are you still trying to trade JVR? So you're making it seem like, oh yeah, that has nothing to do with it. Like, that's the only thing I can think of is that he's still wheeling and dealing, and he thinks he's manipulating the meat. You know what I mean?
I think he's just.
I don't think he has the wherewithal. Yeah.
You start lying about things, and then you just keep doing it.
Yeah.
I think I'll be honest with you guys. I'd be shocked if he's GM of this team by the end of next season.
Yeah, I can't.
By the end of the season, even if the team has improved, I just
the only way I see it is if they somehow make the playoffs, which is like I don't even know, like a 5% chance, then maybe. But
it would. I think it would have to be like you could point directly to Fletcher being responsible and making, like, the Tortorella would have to work out, D'Angelo would have to work out. Like, he'd have to get all these guys locked up.
It'd have to be a home run.
Move JVR, turn the fan base around. I'm like, nobody has faith in you. No one has any idea what's going on. We're losing money. It's like, I'm trying to think, how do you keep your job? Even if you are a good GM, even if you're smart.
I mean, just based on collectively the job he's done, he shouldn't keep his job. Like, if we're being realistic, but
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
is even if he's a good dude, even if he's smart, even if it's not his fault. Let's say it is all their fault. Let's say it's too many cooks in the kitchen. Fletcher wanted only to do great things. Well, they're still going to use it as a scapegoat, aren't they? So how does he survive? If he does survive and it continues this way, they're asleep at the wheel, and I think people should be freaking out for Comcast to sell or whatever you guys want to do. Like,
I think they're going to have to perform well above expectations for him to keep his job.
Exactly. Yes. That was my thoughts too. It's got to be, like I was saying, just like if they make the playoffs, it's a performance-based league. So they'll say, well, we didn't make it last year. Look, we made it this year. You keep your job. But like we said, and we've been outlining the whole show, the chance of this team making the playoffs is pretty much slim to none, I would say. Well, unless there's some sort of miracle on the ice that we're not aware of.
There is no way. And I know from meeting Brian Roberts, I know he's a big Flyers fan, right? And he's not the only one. There's a board and all that stuff, but he is a big Flyers fan. There's no way that they did not notice the reaction of all the buildup around Gaudreau, thinking that they were going to build some goodwill, right? And then in that same instant,
there's a laughing stock around the league,
embarrassing themselves publicly, embarrassing themselves locally, and missing out on. And again, I wasn't in the Johnny Gaudreau has to make it here because we'll be good that way. I was more of like, a guy wants to come home, is willing to give you a discount, and you fucked up your situation so bad here that you weren't able to make that. And I look at that as poor management, right? So it's like, as as like a boss guy, even if you're not like hating Chuck Fletcher, you kind of just looking at it. You look at the overall
what are you
temperature.
Doing? Yeah, exactly.
You can't ignore it. You can't even. You don't even need to know hockey.
Yeah.
You know, you'll panic and do something.
Well, at least from that perspective, you could pretty much just sum it up to, well, your team was terrible, so you signed 2 middling defensemen instead of the 115-point player for the same amount of money. Basically, you could equate it to that almost.
Again, you have to understand he's managing expectations up too, right?
Yeah.
So he's selling them on. I know all this happened, blah blah blah, but here's my plan.
Yeah,
and that's why I said if this plan is not going to work, whatever plan you do have, I have no idea how it survived. And again, the plan of work means you made moves like you're a playoff team. Yeah. One guy here, one guy. You didn't sell and go back to what Dan was saying. If he, and we've talked about this before, if he started a while ago, moved Risto, moved other guys, didn't add D'Angelo, didn't make us better, but continued to move players, gain assets, you would not see people freaking.
Well, because you could at least see a plan at that point. Whereas with this, it's just a middle of ground, and you're not really sure if it's a rebuild, retool.
Right. My point is, it's impossible to hide.
Yeah, pretty much, because it's just unorganized in terms of the way things are being run. Basically,
I said AV was going to get fired. It took a lot longer, but I was like, I don't understand how the man will keep his job.
It's the same essential deal with Fletcher.
That's what I'm saying right now. I don't see it unless it's a humongous turnaround.
Which I also don't really see either. But
I don't see either. All right. Well, we're at 90 minutes. We can wrap this one up. Dan, really appreciate you coming on. It's obviously kind of like the dead point of the season, but I think it was a good time to just pontificate a little bit.
Yeah,
what do you got?
Pleasure, man.
Yeah, awesome. We'll have you back on too. Hey, what do you got going on? You want to tell people other stuff that's...
Yeah, so I'm on the O&B podcast. We record, same thing over the summer, maybe like once every 2 weeks, once a month, and then we'll be every week during the season, me, Isaiah, and Chef, and that's part of the Nitty Gritty Network. And you can find me on Twitter at dsilver88. And then, I keep busy in the summer. You can find me at MGM National Harbor Casino in Maryland playing some poker. So if you're in the DC or Baltimore area, come down. Or one of the local horse tracks. I'm always out at the track putting in some bets. So, but yeah, that's where I am. Find me on Twitter at dsilver88. And yeah, it's guys, I really appreciate coming on. So thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Of course, it was a pleasure.
Hopefully we'll have some fun things to talk about in the future, maybe.
Here's hoping.
Yeah. Either bet that I was considering betting on the Flyers making the playoffs just of the sheer fact that Tortorella was coach. And I was like, everybody's doubting them. So
yeah, you get a good.
The odds would be nice.
Yeah. It would be a losing bet, but if you hit, it would be cool.
Yeah.
Vasili, what do you got going on?
Not too much. I'll have an article that comes out with this podcast actually tomorrow or today, I guess, when you guys are listening to it. So go check that out on flyersnittygritty.com. And we really, appreciate everybody's support and just, continuing to keep with us and listen on during an off season that has not been very good in terms of positive Flyers news. So
yeah, it's been a unique summer, uniquely terrible.
That might be the name of the episode. Uniquely terrible.
Uniquely terrible. It's not
nice.
Bad. All right. Again, shout out to our sponsor, Jim Steaks. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation earlier for Jim's, but Jim's at 4th and South. Make sure to go get yourself a cheesesteak. They're our sponsor. They're Flyers fans. Go get a cheesesteak. And thank you again for listening. Please like, subscribe, share our stuff out. It's a humongous help. Leave us comments, ratings, the whole thing. Reach out to us. All of that is immensely helpful. We love you for even taking the time to listen and subscribe and comment. It's awesome. So awesome. And we're going to keep going weekly throughout the summer, and no changes there, and more guests and all that stuff. So thank you again. And remember, always stay gritty.